Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about 3 wellness and lifestyle kind of hacks, adjustments, tips that I've personally found so interesting and so relevant in my own life. And I feel like these are not really talked about enough in the health and wellness space. So I want to shed some light on these topics, and maybe you guys are going to find them really helpful and interesting as I have found them, because I've been fascinated by all of this. And I just think it's so exciting to learn more about our bodies, especially if you are a woman watching this. The first part of this is really going to be female focused. So we're going to be talking about our cycles, hormones, and how to really optimize and tune in and work with our cycle in order to reach our goals faster, to feel better, to have better balanced hormones as well, to have clearer skin, better digestion, gut health, sleep. So many of these things really depend on the health and balance of our hormones. So I am so excited to get into this information today. My goal for this video is to have it be a good overview and introduction to these topics and just kind of share what I have learned over the last few months. But I definitely want to dive deeper into all of these topics with you guys and even just in my own personal life. But hopefully this is going to be a good introduction and a good reference in case I talk about some of these topics in future videos. I can direct you guys to this video and you can get a good kind of overview. With that said as well, I will make sure to leave lots of great resources, books, and podcast links in the description box down below if you guys want to do a deeper dive into all of this as well. I got really interested in all of this last spring when I stopped taking the birth control pill. I was on it for about 3.5 years. And when you do take birth control, your natural hormones are pretty much hijacked by the hormones in the pill. And when I got off of it, my body all of a sudden had to rebalance itself hormonally. Thankfully, my cycle was pretty regular. I didn't lose my period. It wasn't very erratic, but my skin broke out really bad. And that was just so interesting to see how my body reacted. My skin is like a mirror from what's going on the inside. If you guys have been with me for a while, you know that I have very sensitive skin. It's very much affected by the food that I eat, the way that I live, my lifestyle, my stress. So anyway, it was just really interesting to just see how my skin reacted. And it took about 5 to 6 months for my skin to heal and for my hormones to be completely balanced and regular. I just find it so interesting and so beautiful to learn about the female cycle and truly how incredible our bodies are and how different we are actually depending on what phase of our cycle we're in. Our physiology is very different, our chemical makeup is different, how we metabolize food is different, our energy, creativity, even how we build muscle and how easily we recover from workouts. All of these things are very affected by the different hormones that are at play during each phase of our cycle. And I just think learning about all of this is very empowering. It's empowering to understand our bodies better, especially if you are more sensitive to these kinds of things within your body. I know that, just from dealing with my own skin issues, I have friends who can literally eat and drink and do whatever they want and they have clear and beautiful, perfect skin. But for me, it's never been that way. I really have to take care and put effort and love into my routines, what I eat, how I live, in order for my skin to be clear and healthy. So we're all a little bit different, but if you're someone who just naturally is more sensitive to these fluctuations in your body, then hopefully this information will be really helpful. So let's dive into this. So the first topic I want to talk about, and I would say the main focus of this video, is syncing and being mindful and learning about your hormonal cycle. And that means making lifestyle choices based on the specific phase of the cycle that you're in. So it's actually really interesting, and something that just blew my mind when I learned about all of this is that most research that comes out on diet and lifestyle is primarily made on men and some postmenopausal women. And the women who are included in these studies, the very few women that are in their follicular phase, as this is when women's hormones are most similar to that of men. So that is in our low hormone phase. The reason this is so interesting is because we are so biologically different. Obviously, our biological makeup is different, but we're very different chemically and hormonally than men. I think it's also really interesting to note that men run on a 24-hour cycle, our circadian clock, our circadian rhythm, which we also run on. But we as women also run on a monthly clock during our menstrual cycle, which is very different from men. And even within our cycle, we're so different based on the different phases of it. Our physiology and chemical makeup is so different depending on what major hormones are at play during that specific phase. And these hormones have a huge impact, specifically when it comes to blood glucose sensitivity, to our metabolism, to muscle building, how we recover from workouts, our energy, mood, digestion. So I think it's so important to learn about these things so that we can learn how to work with our body, with our natural physiology, and not against it. And probably way back in the day, we were a lot more connected with our bodies, what we needed. But as we all know, we live in such a high stress environment. We constantly have things going on, and it can be difficult to tune in and to listen to what our body needs. And especially with our mind and our ego, a lot of us are go-getters. We want to achieve and do. We want to be disciplined and push ourselves, and obviously with good intentions. But in fact, it can actually be working against us. It can be working against our progress. So I've been reading some really interesting books on this topic and listening to really great podcasts with some doctors and specialists that are really, really incredible. And I've been taking lots of notes. You guys know that I like to make notes in my journal. I've also made this little sheet for myself that kind of summarizes the different phases of our cycle and how we should adjust certain things like diet and exercise. So we have two main phases of our cycle. We have the follicular phase and we have the luteal phase. So the follicular phase is the first half of our cycle. So a normal cycle is usually 28 days. It can range from, I think, 26 to 32 days, but 28 days is the average. So the follicular phase is between days 1 and 14, and this is generally referred to as our low hormone phase. So when progesterone and estrogen are relatively low. The follicular phase includes our period, so our menstrual bleeding phase, which is usually between like 3 to 7 days. And then later in the follicular phase, we have the ovulatory phase, which is when we release an egg. And that's the time of the month that we are very fertile and that we can get pregnant. And then the second half of our menstrual cycle is called the luteal phase. And here we have kind of the first half of the luteal phase that has its own characteristics, and then the second half of the luteal phase. So this is the phase just before your period. This is usually where we experience PMS symptoms like fatigue, bloating, irritability. And the luteal phase is also known as our high hormone phase. So that's kind of an overview of the different phases within our cycle. So as I mentioned, when we have varying levels of these different hormones, specifically estrogen and progesterone, and also testosterone, we're going to talk a little bit about that. These have a huge impact on our other bodily functions, like again, metabolism, muscle recovery, muscle building, sleep, digestion, and so on. So in our lower, more stable hormone phase, this is when we have the best energy and stamina. So when it comes to exercise, this is a great time to be focusing on building muscles. We burn fat a lot easier in this stage of our cycle. Also during our ovulatory phase, testosterone rises, and this is another great hormone that can help us to support muscle building. We have better recovery, again, our energy is better, and this is really like the golden phase of our cycle to be focusing on those more high intensity workouts in terms of energy requirements and how hard you can push yourself and recovery. And this is of course when your period is done, so not when you're still in that shedding phase. It's also been shown that our metabolism during this phase is slower, so we might not feel as hungry or have as many cravings during this time. This book is really, really great. It's called In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. She refers to the follicular phase as our kind of inner spring. So we might naturally crave more lighter foods, salads, fresh things. And if you enjoy doing any kind of intermittent fasting, this could be a good time to do it. I highly recommend looking into the work of Sarah Marlette. She has a whole guide on this. It's so fascinating. I'll make sure to have it linked down below. But she recommends that this is the time of your cycle where intermittent fasting can be most beneficial to your body if you want to do something like that, compared to the other phases of your cycle where doing intermittent fasting can actually backfire and create a lot of stress on your body, thus releasing the stress hormone called cortisol, which leads to fat storage, muscle wasting, and kind of just undoing the benefits or working against what you're really trying to achieve. So once we've ovulated, we've passed the ovulatory phase, we are now in the luteal phase. So this is again known as our higher hormone phase. So estrogen will initially drop off, as you can see here from this chart, but then it does rise back up again in the later half of the phase. But progesterone is also increasing here and it peaks. Some characteristics characteristics of progesterone is that it slows down your digestion. This can lead you to feel bloated. It can also increase water retention, which are definitely symptoms of PMS. And it's also been shown that our metabolism increases in this phase of our cycle, and the amount of calories that we need also increases. So if we're trying to adhere to the same way of eating, in this phase compared to the first one, it's pretty much inevitable that we're going to end up crashing and overeating on something, for example, like sugary things, chocolates, processed food, chips, those yummy things that we tend to crave a lot during our period and just before our period. But of course, these foods can actually make us feel worse because it can make our bloating even more intense, it can cause us to retain even more water and just drain us of even more energy because of all the spikes of blood glucose, and then we crash. So instead, it's really important to support our body during this phase by actually eating more and providing our body with more calories from real whole food sources so that it doesn't feel the need to go and binge or lose control and just eat like half the kitchen. So focusing on getting in more whole plant carbohydrates during this time will also really help to manage cortisol. In the luteal phase, we are naturally more susceptible to stressors, and those increased stressors can release the stress hormone called cortisol, and increased cortisol can lead to fat storage and muscle wasting. So it's really important to be mindful of this in this phase and to also adjust our workouts and lifestyle. If we're trying to do really intense workouts in this phase, especially in the last few days of your luteal phase, so like the week before you get your period, it can totally backfire. Again, because we are more susceptible to stressors at this time, it can increase cortisol much faster, and again, that leads to increased fat storage and muscle wasting, which is definitely not what we want. So in this phase, it's recommended to focus a lot more on low impact exercises like Pilates, yoga, flexibility, doing restorative exercises as well, even like walking, and just being really, really gentle on your body so that you're not spiking up your stress and essentially working against your natural physiology and your natural chemistry at this time. So for me, this phase is really about slowing down, doing less, not putting any additional stressors on your body, but really working with your physiology at this time specifically, so that not only you'll feel better, but you can also maintain the progress and the efforts that you made in the first half of your cycle when you were focusing on muscle building, strength training, resiliency, etc. And also the fact that our metabolism increases and that we need more food during this time to support our body. Actually tuning into that and supporting that can really help us to avoid, again, those like sugar cravings. Instead, just really supporting your body and giving it more food of the whole natural foods. Of course, having your sweets and things like that, but not feeling like you need like 3 kilos of them and then end up having that and then feeling even worse, and then your skin breaks out, and then it's just like a whole thing. So I think that is super, super interesting as well. And also going back to intermittent fasting, if that's something that you like to do, again, referring to the work by Marlette, she suggests that this is not the right time to be intermittent fasting. In fact, intermittent fasting is a stressor on your body, and if you do it during this phase, it can again just backfire. It can increase your cortisol, which again increases fat storage, especially around the belly and the hips. It can make you even more irritable and throw your mood off, and it's just not the right time to be doing this. Again, highly recommend checking out her work. I will have links for her down below, along with these other books that I'm referencing. And then of course, towards the end of our luteal phase, we end our cycle and we start the menstrual bleeding. So we now go back to the first half of the follicular phase. This is when our hormone levels are at their lowest. Our energy is also at the lowest during this phase. And this is a really important phase to relax and to truly let our bodies recover and go through this phase with as minimal stress as possible. So it's really important during this phase to support ourselves, even if we're not feeling super crampy. And I know just personally, the first day of my period, tell me if you guys are the same, I am so exhausted. All I want to do is be in bed. I want to be cozy and not do anything. And even the food that I want to eat during my period is usually a lot heavier, richer, more comforting. And again, going back to exercise and activity, it's really great for this phase if you focus on more restorative things like yoga, Pilates again, but very gentle. And basically every specialist and doctor that I've listened to and read books from suggests that we do nothing during this phase. So really taking it easy. Again, if we want to do like gentle walks or gentle yoga, that's okay, but really not pushing ourselves in this phase because again, it can just backfire. Also, just on an emotional and kind of spiritual level, during this phase, I tend to be just much more reflective and I want to go inwards, and I've always been that way. It's something that I've definitely recognized within myself, but now reading about all of this information, it makes so much sense. And it's interesting how many parallels there are between us women and how these hormones really affect our mood and our energy and our creativity, and how outward or inward we can feel during the different phases of our cycle. So that's kind of like an overview of the phases of our cycle and how it relates to different lifestyle aspects like exercise and diet and energy and things like that. For me, this is so interesting. I also highly recommend to get in tune with what phase of your cycle that you're in. You can use an app. I actually use two different ones right now. So I use Femometer, which I've talked to you guys about before. They also have a thermometer that syncs directly to the app. So you can take your basal body temperature in the morning. It logs it in automatically to the app, and that helps you to better predict what phase of the cycle you're in. They also have some other great little accessories to really make this a very personalized and customized thing to you. I also have the Flow app, which is by Alyssa Vitti, who wrote this book, and that one is super interesting as well. They are kind of different, and because I'm just really interested in this stuff, I have both. You don't need both, but I do think it's nice to know where you are in your cycle and track it so that you can better get to know your body and be gentle with it and make those modifications when it's needed, and know when you can kind of push yourself a bit more when it comes to exercise, and know when to kind of scale back to focus on more recovery and restorative forms of activity, both physically and mentally. Again, I will make sure to have lots of great resources down below for you guys where you can do deeper dives into all of this stuff if you guys find this really interesting as I do. So the second thing I want to talk to you guys about that I find so interesting is the circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is our internal kind of biological clock that controls things like our sleep, our wakefulness, our digestion, even our blood sugar levels, and of course our hormones. And both men and women have this circadian rhythm, so this 24-hour clock. And then of course, as we discussed in the last topic with our menstrual cycle, so we have our circadian clock, which is our 24-hour clock, and then we have our monthly menstrual cycle, which is around 28 days. So some ways you can be better in sync with your circadian rhythm is to live in better balance and better harmony with light and with darkness. So in the morning, for example, to actually wake up and see the sunlight, even let the sunlight touch your skin, let it touch your eyes, open up the windows. You could also go for a little morning walk, just get out a little bit, get some fresh air. And this will set off a reaction of hormones that wakes your body up naturally without caffeine. And also when it comes to nutrition, to focus having your larger meals during daytime when the sun is out, when our activity is naturally higher, as opposed to at night when our body goes into a very healing and restorative mode and everything kind of slows down in terms of digestion. This modification alone can be especially helpful if you are trying to lose weight. Just shifting your larger meals towards the beginning part of the day where your pancreas is still a lot more active, you're a lot more sensitive to blood sugar, and your metabolism is naturally higher. This can be really helpful. So focusing on having a really good, nourishing, healthy, filling breakfast. Same thing for lunch, making sure that you're really feeling full and satisfied, and then trying to have an earlier dinner. So say around like 6 o'clock, it's recommended that we complete eating around 3 hours before we go to bed for optimal digestion, absorption as well, and quality of sleep. So this is something that I think think can be really, really impactful. Another really interesting fact that I wrote down is that in the evening, our pineal gland releases a hormone called melatonin, which we all know is that hormone that makes us feel really nice and sleepy. And this trickles all the way down to our pancreas, and it signals our pancreas to turn down digestive and blood sugar regulations, which basically means that our body stops becoming so good at properly getting the glucose out of our blood and into our muscles and into our liver, and instead is more susceptible to store it away as fat. Also, some ways that you can sync better to your circadian rhythm at night is to lower the lights and not have like big, bright, specifically blue light, like that very sharp light shining in your eyes and your face. So having more warm toned lights and dimmer lights if possible as well. That will also help to naturally secrete that melatonin and just put your body into a more restful and restorative mood, preparing you for a really great night's sleep as well. So if you can put your phone away for a little bit before you go to bed, maybe pick up a book instead, or do something that doesn't require a computer screen or a phone screen, that can really help with that hormone regulation as well. And again, just putting you into a more restful and relaxing state before you drift off to sleep. And then the third thing I want to talk about, which I also find so interesting, is our bio-individuality and how we are physiologically so different on a chemical level, especially when it comes to our gut. The reason this is so important is when it comes to certain diets, like high carb, low fat, or keto, or paleo, or vegan, or low FODMAP, or pescatarian, Mediterranean, there is so much information out there and so much advice, and a lot of contradicting advice as well, and studies that support all different kinds of diets, and then research studies that are also against different diets. Truly, what I've come to realize from my own personal experience and all the research that I've done is that there is no one perfect diet or even exercise or lifestyle for one person. We are all a little bit different, and that's okay. Just recognizing how the state of our gut and the quality of our gut health greatly impacts things like digestion, absorption, of course, our metabolism, our immune system. This alone makes us so different from anyone else, even in our families, our circle of friends, people online. And the quality of our gut health is of course affected by things that we eat, but not only that, it can depend on where we grew up. How was the quality and the soil and the water that we grew up eating or that we're currently eating? If we've taken medication, if we've been on antibiotics or even on the pill, that greatly affects the health of our gut microbes as well. Things like stress, if we've had trauma, if we had trauma in our childhood, if we're dealing with a lot of stress right now, and even how we're able to deal with that stress. Is it easy for our bodies to literally digest and process stress? Or are we people who are more sensitive to that? Of course, our genetics can also play a huge role in our gut health, whether we have pets or not, how often we communicate and interact with other humans, and other things like how much exercise we're doing, if we're like a pro athlete, or if we do more gentle forms of workouts, more walks. So it's really important to keep these factors in mind when it comes to knowing like what diet or what foods are the best for you. And I know it's very easy to compare ourselves to other people, or even wanting to be eating or living like another person and not feeling like it's working for you. Our bodies are constantly changing as well, and it's important for us to be in tune with our bodies and to support our bodies through different phases of life, through different ages of life. Something that might have worked for us a few years ago or even a few months ago might not necessarily be working right now, and that's okay. Our body's needs are constantly changing depending on our age, our hormone balance, our environment, our stress, even the season. If you live in a very seasonally different climate like we do, if you have like 4 seasons that are very harsh and different from one another, that can play a huge impact on the kinds of foods that you need as well. So basically my point is to be open-minded and take everything that you read online with a grain of salt and run it through your own filter and through your own own body and your own kind of gut feelings, and not feel like you need to put yourself in a restrictive box or adhere to too many strict rules, because again, we are then losing touch with our natural intuition and with our own body's cues. And I think that can be really dangerous, because then we can be chasing some ideal or running after some form of perfectionism, and it doesn't actually serve us in the long run, which is then basically like so silly that we're running after something that is not actually what our body wants. A few ways that you can get in tune with your body and know if a specific lifestyle or diet or set of foods is working for you. These are a few markers that I have written down that you can kind of check on. So for example, for me, a big one is the clarity of my skin. For me, I know that that is directly associated with the health of my gut. For me, it manifests in acne, but for others, it could be rashes, it could be eczema. Of course, you can see how does your digestion feel just generally during the day after you eat. Do you feel satisfied after eating, or do you have cravings soon after? How is your energy, your mood? How are you sleeping? How is the quality and the depth of your sleep? And then of course, I would also highly recommend, if you are worried about certain things, within your diet or how you're feeling, you can of course get your blood test done and a hormone test done. That is what I did. Little side note on that, it did come back that I was extremely low in iron. So that's why I also had to make a few diet adjustments to cater to that. But I was extremely low. I believe the healthy range is between 50 and 200, something like that. If not, I will put it here. And I was at like a 10 or something. Like it was extremely low. So this is so important to actually go and get professionally checked and see what is going on within your body. And on this topic as well, I think it's really important to acknowledge how stress really has a huge impact on the health of our digestive system, on the food that we're eating, and even of course on the clarity of our skin. This is something that I talk about a lot, is the mental and the emotional importance when it comes to the wellness of your body. So I know that with good intention, we can all get very focused on eating the right things, on doing the right exercises and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's so important to cater to our emotional needs and not get too hung up or too strict or too fixated on being perfect or getting things 100% right all of the time. There is so much that we can talk about when it comes to this topic, but I hope this was a good introduction and a good overview. I definitely want to share more about this in upcoming videos and vlogs. Again, definitely make sure to check the description box down below for further resources, books, podcast recommendations. I find this stuff so interesting and I'm really excited to keep learning about it. I would also love to hear from you. Is this something that you resonate with, that you would want to learn more about? Definitely let me know below in the comments. I hope that you're all having a beautiful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.